The storm hit hard, waves crashing over the small boat, the sky dark with fury, and the wind howling like a wild animal. Just think of being one of 6 boys stuck in the middle of the ocean, the boat sinking, and no land in sight. It's a nightmare, right? But here's the crazy part. They survived it, they actually did. And not just for a day or two. These guys were stuck in the storm for 8 whole days, and then on a remote island for over a year. That's just crazy. I wouldn't have survived that. And they didn't just survive, they thrived. Now you might be thinking, what kind of story I'm talking about? So let me ask you a question first. You've probably read Lord of the Flies, right? So you know the deal. A group of boys stranded on an island, and the whole thing turns into chaos. They fight, they kill, they lose all sense of humanity. So what would you expect from a bunch of boys stranded in the middle of nowhere? Right, total breakdown. But wait, this isn't just a story. It's a real-life twist that completely flips everything we thought we knew about human nature. Well, these Tongan boys didn't just survive, they worked together. They didn't turn on each other or start a war over food. They built a community and didn't just get by, they helped each other. And that's what makes this story wild. They're the living proof that maybe, just maybe, humans aren't as quick to turn savage as Lord of the Flies would have you believe. So how did they do it? How did they make it work when everything around them seemed set for disaster? Stick around, because this isn't just another survival story. This is a real life, how the heck did they do that? Kind of story that will make you rethink everything you thought you knew about survival. You won't believe how it all unfolded. Let's get started. So let's start with the boys who would become the Tongan castaways. This is the story of 6 friends, aged between 13 and 19, were Luke Vekoso, Stephen Tavita Fatai Latu, Sione Fatawa, David Tavita Siola, Kolo Fekitoa, and Mano Sione Felipe Totao. Well, they were the typical island kids, curious, a bit restless, and hungry for something more. But well, teenagers everywhere are a bit curious, always looking for something adventurous but escaping your homeland? That might make you think what kind of place Tonga was that the boys wanted to run away, right? So Tonga is a collection of stunning islands in the Pacific Ocean, and you know islands, lush greenery, pristine beaches, and coral reefs that look straight out of a postcard. It's the kind of place where the ocean hugs you from every angle. But for these boys, it wasn't all sunshine and surf. No, for them, Tonga was starting to feel like a bit of a cage. Beautiful, yes, but small, predictable, and maybe even a little too familiar. The people in Tonga live in tight-knit communities where tradition runs deep, the land and sea provide. But the options? Well, they could feel a bit limited, and that's made the boys mind. Like all young adventurers, they didn't want to just sit on the sidelines. They were tired of this boring life. They wanted more. They had heard stories about places far beyond their island, a world that was bigger, wilder, and completely unknown to them. The boys started to feel the island as a box, which was slowly getting smaller and smaller, suffocating them. But it wasn't just about escaping their island life. It was about the pull of the unknown. What lay beyond the horizon? What mysteries did the Pacific Ocean hold? What if they could discover something entirely new? The island was their home, but their dreams were bigger than the shores of Tonga. And that, right there, was the spark that would set everything in motion. So what did they do? They made a decision. No big plan, no backup, just a burning desire to explore the world beyond. It wasn't some reckless decision to just get away. It was about freedom, testing their limits, and seeing how far they could go. They were ready for an adventure, but little did they know that this wasn't going to be their average adventure. The journey they had in mind was about to spiral into something none of them could have imagined. No one could have guessed what awaited them on that fateful sea voyage. The unknown wasn't just waiting for them, it was about to challenge them in ways that would change their lives forever. The first step out of the island was just the beginning. What came next? Well, let's just say it was the kind of story that would make even Lord of the Flies seem tame. So, let's just say that these boys weren't exactly planning a tropical vacation. No, they were out for an adventure. Something bigger than the simple island life they knew in Tonga. And let's be real, who can blame them? Life on a tiny Pacific island, full of school, chores, and the same old beach day after day, doesn't exactly scream thrilling. It's like being stuck on a never-ending rerun of a show you've already seen 100 times. You'd want to escape too. The thing is, these boys didn't just want to break the routine. They were chasing something bigger. The ocean stretched out in front of them like an unsolved mystery. What was out there? What could they find? They had no idea, but they were willing to risk it. The idea of leaving their small island and heading out into the vast unknown didn't seem like a crazy idea to them. In fact, it felt downright exciting. They were young, full of energy, and ready to leave their comfort zone. What could go wrong, right? But this wasn't just some random decision made on a lazy afternoon. Over time, the thought of escaping had grown in their minds. Every time they walked through the same street and met the same people, their will to run from the routine increased and do something that would make their hearts race. For them, their past, present, and future were all the same and predictable. No adventures, no challenges, just a straight road on which they had to keep walking. And honestly, who wouldn't? The idea of this huge world, or the stories of a world beyond the ocean. But then, you are stuck in a small place. This small world can be suffocating, wouldn't it be? That's the stuff their dreams were made of. So in June 1965, the boys ran away from St. Andrew's Anglican boarding school in Nuku'alofa on Tonga Tapu. They did it. They grabbed a boat, or you should better say stole. How else do you expect them to find a boat? They were just a bunch of kids, no big money, nothing like that. And the boat they stole, maybe not the best one, but hey, it was something. They set out, fueled by a sense of freedom they couldn't get on land. The risk? It was just part of the adventure. If they'd thought about it too much, maybe they would have reconsidered. But they didn't have the time for second guessing. They were living for the thrill of the journey. And then, bam, the shipwreck. Yeah, you saw that one coming, right? Their grand adventure? That just began. It turned into a battle for survival quicker than they could say, this was a bad idea. What they thought would be a fun getaway quickly became a nightmare. They went from let's escape to how the heck do we survive this in the blink of an eye. And well, it was just the beginning of a journey they never expected, and certainly they were not prepared for. But hey, that's what makes a good story, right? One moment, the boys were feeling the thrill of their daring adventure. The next, they were fighting for their lives. The storm came fast, winds howling, waves crashing like nature itself was determined to wipe them out. The moment the storm hit, it was like the ocean decided to turn into a beast. The boys, thinking they were free from everything back on shore, were now fighting a battle against nature itself. The sky turns black, the wind howls, and the waves start smashing into their boat like a giant slamming a toy into the ground. It wasn't a, oh, maybe we'll get wet kind of storm. No, this was the real deal. The kind of storm that makes you pray you had stayed home and done your chores instead. These 6 boys, they were no match for what the ocean was throwing at them. At first, it was just some big waves, and they were all like, hey, no big deal. But soon they were getting tossed around like rag dolls in a washing machine. The boat, which had been their ticket to freedom, was now their worst enemy. And now they were actually crying. Every time they tried to stabilize it, another wave hit, sending them sprawling across the boat. Some of them got thrown into the water, scrambling to keep their heads above the frothing sea. It wasn't just the storm they were fighting panic too. Now that's scary. Even the thought of it is giving goosebumps. And let's talk about the cold. The kind of cold that doesn't just freeze you, it cuts through your bones and makes you question every life decision you've ever made. They clung to anything they could, pieces of the wrecked boat, chunks of wood, and whatever floating debris they could grab. But the storm wasn't slowing down. No, it just kept coming, relentless and unforgiving. The boys' only hope? Survive. Their survival instincts kicked in as they tried to piece together what was left of their boat. But how do you stay calm when the ocean is literally trying to swallow you whole? That's the real question, because most of us would have drowned by now. So moving forward, one of the boys fell off board and almost didn't make it. He was washed overboard, tossed by the waves like a toy in a bathtub. But somehow, by sheer willpower, or maybe sheer panic, he grabbed onto a piece of floating wreckage. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep him from being swallowed by the ocean. The storm raged on, showing no mercy. But the boys weren't ready to give up. They held onto their raft, pulling each other up when someone slipped. It wasn't pretty, it wasn't graceful, but it was survival. Every wave, every gust of wind just pushed them harder, but they refused to let go. For hours, it felt like they were stuck in an endless battle. Each wave felt like the ocean was trying to knock them out for good. But the boys, they weren't backing down. After what felt like an eternity, the storm began to let up. The waves were still there, but the worst was over. They were battered, bruised, cold, and exhausted, but they had made it. They were still alive. And that was a victory in itself. So they survived the storm, but now they had to face whatever came next. So the storm left them in the middle of the ocean. In the beginning, they felt hopeless, but soon they spotted an island and started swimming towards it. When they thought their issues were resolved, they realized that they were the only ones on this island. The first few days were all about survival, shelter, food, and staying alive. They started by building the most basic shelter they could, using palm fronds, branches, and anything they could find. Was it perfect? No, but it was enough to keep the worst of the elements at bay. The shelter was a place to catch their breath, a small victory in the middle of the chaos. Then came the food hunt. And let me tell you, it wasn't easy. These boys weren't exactly seasoned survivalists, but they were quick learners. They used sharp rocks to fashion tools, set out to catch fish, and found fruits they could eat. The first meal they shared wasn't gourmet by any means. Instead, it was raw fish and seabird. It was proof they could do this. As days turned into weeks, their sense of teamwork began to grow. They had no choice but to rely on each other. And luckily, after 3 months, when they were out to discover the island for more resources, they discovered the ruins of the village of Colomile in the island's volcanic crater. They revived its remains, surviving on feral chickens, wild taro, and bananas. They captured rainwater for drinking in hollowed-out tree trunks. They drank blood from seabirds when they did not have enough water. The boys divided up the labor, teaming up in pairs to work garden, kitchen, and guard duty. Now that's some brain work you probably didn't expect it from a bunch of boys. It wasn't a perfect system. They were kids, so there were fights. But what mattered was that they were working together, not just for survival, but for each other. The island was harsh, unforgiving, but they weren't going to let it break them. With every passing day, their skills sharpened. They learned to read the land, understand the rhythm of the island. They gathered more food, built stronger shelters, and started getting more comfortable in their new but strange home. As they adapted, a deeper sense of connection developed among them. They were no longer just a group of kids who had been thrown together by fate. They were a team. And in the middle of this unexpected paradise, they found something that was more valuable than survival alone: brotherhood. Now, with the basics covered, they faced the bigger question: what was next? Could they hold on long enough to get rescued, or would this island be their home forever? Only time would tell. But one thing was for sure: the boys weren't just surviving, they were thriving. And the real adventure was just beginning. Well, I won't say that in real life nothing happened as written in the book. It happened, but it was natural. What do you expect from them? To act like they were 60 years old, no fighting and stuff? They were a small group, but even small groups have their share of disagreements. It didn't take long for tensions to rise. They were stressed, uncertain about their future. Frustration was bound to bubble over. No one could stay normal at times like this, can you? One moment, they were laughing and joking. The next, they were arguing over something trivial. It wasn't always easy, but every conflict was a test. The boys had no choice but to figure things out. They didn't have the luxury of walking away or blaming someone else. Well, practically, they could walk away. They had the whole island to themselves. Okay, just kidding. So as they had no other options, they had to make decisions together, even when emotions were running high. And somehow they managed to work through it. Well, you can say it wasn't always perfect. Some disagreements were more heated than others, but the boys learned to stop and listen. They realized they couldn't survive on their own egos. They needed each other, and if they were going to make it, they had to compromise, which was surprising coming from teenagers. So that's exactly what they did, and it made their journey much more easier. But the main thing in supporting this mindset was the island itself. Well, the island was like, I will break them apart. Fight, fight. But poor island, he didn't know who was he going against, because they were no average kids. So, well, at least the island did some good for them, even though it didn't meant to. The sea, the weather, and the constant pressure of survival were much tougher opponents than any squabble among them. In these moments, they found a deeper sense of unity. They began to communicate better, share their thoughts, and rely on each other's strengths. There was no room for selfishness or stubbornness. If they were going to survive, it had to be as a team. And in the end, the conflicts actually didn't break them. They made them stronger. Every argument, every disagreement led to better communication and teamwork. They learned how to balance each other out, each boy bringing something different to the table. The island might have been harsh, but the bond between them only grew stronger. And together, they proved that survival wasn't just about food or shelter. It was about sticking together when it mattered most. So, the boys quickly realized that survival was all about routine. Well, they wanted to run from one predictable life and stuck into another one. Funny, isn't it? At first, everything felt chaotic, but not the kind they wanted. Each day was a scramble for food, shelter, and fire. Or you can actually say their life was a scramble now. But soon they figured out a rhythm. They became masters of their environment, slowly transforming the island from a place of fear into a place they could call home. Well, they didn't like their actual home, which was also an island, because of same everyday life, and now calling another island with same predictable life their home. That's not fair. Tonga Island crying in the corner, singing,
You betrayed me, and I know that you'll never feel sorry.
Just kidding. So moving forward, you might have already guessed by now they were quick learners. And let me tell you, they were actually worried about having a balanced diet despite the limited options. You know, eat healthy, stay healthy. That's what I am talking about. They started to find different types of fruits for that purpose. Weird, right? Well, who can think about this stuff when stranded on an island? But well, they were kids, and kids are unpredictable. But let me tell you something more interesting, or well, you can say cute. These boys, despite all the hurdles, didn't give up on their teachings. They actually realized that life is precious, so whenever they would kill a seabird, they would actually have a funeral for it. Innocent, but amazing, right? Now, with everything being settled down, the boys needed something to wear of the tiredness at the end of the day. One of them made a guitar from the stuff available on the island. Well, these boys keep on surprising us with their talent. So at the end of the day, they would gather around the fire and sing songs, tell jokes, laugh their lungs out. They played games, even invented new ones. They made up stories to keep their minds active, keeping the fear of isolation at bay. At the moment, no one would ever think that these boys are stranded on the island. An interesting thing, they even composed a song. How cool that is, right? They didn't just survive, they found ways to thrive, to make life bearable and even enjoyable. Laughter echoed through their camp, and even when the work was hard, they managed to find moments of lightness. Their days on the island were far from easy, but they were becoming experts at survival. They weren't just getting by, they were living. And every day they were proving that they could turn adversity into something good. But with all their routines and adaptations, there was still one question that loomed. How long would they stay? Would rescue ever come? Or would this island be their home for good? After 15 long months, it happened. The boys were rescued. It wasn't a dramatic Hollywood moment with a helicopter swooping in, but it was close enough. A ship appeared on the horizon, and for a moment, they thought they were seeing things. Could this be it? Was this their ticket off the island? It was the answer to their silent prayers, and they couldn't believe it when the ship finally reached them. It was sailed by Captain Peter Warner, who when first saw a naked kid on an island, he was astonished. One of the boys started to swim towards Warner's boat and explained his situation. At that time, some prisoners were left isolated on island, so Warner thought it was something like that. At the beginning, Warner didn't buy their story. To verify their information, Warner radioed their names to Nuku Alofa, and after a 20-minute wait, he was told, "You found them. These boys have been given up for dead. Funerals have been held. If it's them, this is a miracle." So it wasn't just a rescue, it was a rebirth. After over a year of living off the land, of fighting for survival, they were going home. Their eyes were wide with disbelief, but deep down, they knew they'd done it. They'd made it. The ship was a lifeline, a symbol that everything they'd been through hadn't been for nothing. The crew treated them to fresh clothes, food, and a level of comfort they had completely forgotten existed. The boys were finally leaving the island that had tested their limits in every possible way. But getting back to society wasn't as easy as just stepping off the boat. Everything had changed. The world that had once seemed so familiar was now strange, overwhelming even. Their families were overjoyed to see them, but the questions came pouring in. What was it really like? How did you survive? But how could they explain it? How do you put into words the feeling of staring death in the face for months on end and coming out alive? The boys had been through something no one could truly understand. And even though they were surrounded by loved ones, they felt a bit like outsiders. But this wasn't just a story of survival. It was about strength, unity, and the lessons they'd learned about resilience. As their story spread, they became more than just survivors. They became symbols. People all over the world looked at them and saw what true perseverance looked like. Their return to civilization wasn't just a homecoming, it was a statement. No matter how tough things get, humans are capable of extraordinary things when they refuse to give up. The island may have been behind them, but its lessons would stay with them forever. What do you think you would have done if you were stranded on an island with nothing but your wits to survive? Do you think you could have pushed through the challenges like these boys did? Or would the odds have been too much to handle? Let me know in the comments.